BZA meeting to order and ask everyone to please silence their cell phones and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ask the zoning clerk to please call the roll.
Sure. Don Sutton,
Here.
Jason Acevedo,
Here.
Brad Cook,
Here.
Larry Harden, Quinn Lockett,
Here.
Jessica Kingsley, and Michelle Cook here.
Thank you. Anyone that intends to speak or give testimony, I would ask that you stand and be sworn in by our zoning clerk. It should mention we don't have a court reporter today, so we are recording the hearing. And Lisa, if you could.
Okay, it's the first time I've ever done an oath, so you're supposed to raise your right hand. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I did. Thank you. And I need to ask for a motion to approve the BZA meetings from 9/27, BZA 23-004.
Make a motion to approve minutes for BZA 23004 from 9/27/2023.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Mackin,
Yes.
Mrs. Cook? Yes. Mr. Sutton?
Yes. Thank you. Make sure before you leave today that you sign the minutes there. So we're here tonight. First business is to hear BZA case 23-005, request by Alamo Creek Investments LLC, 6999 State Route East, Sunbury, Ohio, 43074, for a variance encroaching 17 feet and a side yard setback for addition of refrigerator unit and upstairs office to existing non-conforming building, plus or minus 1.5 acres, parcel number 418-110-01-050-000, known as Beer and Wine Drive-Thru. And I would ask our zoning clerk to please read in the exhibits for the hearing.
Let's see, the original file exhibits, Exhibit 1, application for an area variance, 3 pages, dated 10/6 of 2023, submitted 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 2, legal description, 1 page, no date, submitted with application file 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 3, plat plan of Alamo Creek Investments, plus or minus 1.05 acres, 1 page, submitted with application file 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 4, adjacent property owners, 1 page, no date, submitted with application file 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 5, color picture of front view of drive-through and rear view of drive-through, 6999 South or State Route 37 East, 2 pages, submitted with application file 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 6, color picture of street view of drive-through, 6999 State Route 37 East, 1 page, submitted with application filed 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 7, 11 by 17 site plan of project and proposed floor plan, 6999 State Route 37 East, 2 pages, submitted with application filed 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 8, 11 by 17 exterior building elevations, submitted with application filed 10/6 of 2023. Exhibit 9, email dated 10/5 of 2023 from Craig Hall, Fire Prevention Lieutenant, Berlin Township Fire Department, to Dina Herbert, Architect, 1 page, submitted with application filed 10/6 of 2023. And then zoning office exhibits, Exhibit 10, aerial view of surrounding property owners within 300 feet and addresses dated 10/30 of 2023. Exhibit 11, request for legal publication, the Delaware Gazette via email dated 11/6 of 2023. Exhibit 12, notice of hearing to applicant dated 11/08 of 2023. Exhibit 13, letter to adjacent property owners with proof of mailing dated 11/8 of 2023. And the last exhibit 14, proof of publication in the Delaware Gazette dated 11/8 of 2023.
Thank you, Lisa. And I would remind everyone that this is being recorded, so if you could speak clearly and loudly so that the court reporter will have to transcribe this at a later date. I would ask our applicant to please stand and introduce yourself.
My name is Dino Herbert. I am the architect, and I'm here representing Allen Creek Investments LLC in their desire for this variance to the zoning code. Not sure if you want me to just go ahead and present what we've got here. They would like to expand their existing facilities. They bought the property in 2020, which is after the fact in terms of how the building sets with regard to its distance from the side yard setback. Based on the zoning code, the side yard setback would need to be 1/3 of the height times or plus the length of the property, which would mean we would need to be about 28 feet from that west parcel line. Today, as the drive-through was built, it was built about 24.5 feet from that west property line, and that is evident from the survey that we had done several months back. And so the existing property was already non-conforming to the Berlin zoning township zoning code. And so the property owners feel as if, you know, the property was already non-compliant in that regard. They wish to expand it so that they can continue to be a good neighbor. Because it is a drive-through, by its very nature, they need to have 3 sides of the building open. If they were to try to add an addition on any of the other sides, the north, south, or the east side, essentially they'd be shutting themselves out of business. I think that one of the reasons, perhaps when they built the building, they built it close to the west line is because of where it is. Right at the end of the driveway, that's one parcel. Essentially, he owns both of those sections. And the line between Berlin Township and Berkshire Township goes kind of right between the middle of his parcel there. And so I'm only conjecturing at that point, assuming that may have been the reason they kind of moved things to the west. Government services won't be affected. The surrounding neighborhood, this addition that is being provided, we don't believe that it will become an eyesore in any shape or fashion. All along that stretch of Ohio 37 is a very mix of different uses, businesses, fast food, office, churches. And so we don't believe that we would be distracting from the existing fabric of that area in any way. Obviously, the owner was unaware of any zoning restriction when they bought the property back in 2020 with regard to that. As I mentioned earlier, if they were to try to build an addition on any of the other 3 or 4 sides, that would cause an issue in that regard. The intention, if I were to look at the exhibit that has the exterior elevations, is that the exterior elevations would just be a siding that is comparable with the existing siding, which is a wood siding. It'll probably not be wood. It'll be either vinyl or metal, and one that would be not dissimilar from their neighbor to the west, which is clad in siding as well. We had discussions about putting the stairs on the rear, but because they would not like to add any plumbing to the second floor of this area, they wanted to make sure they have the stair on the south side of the building so that they still access the existing toilet facilities that are on the first floor of the existing drive-through.
Let me go ahead and have you stop there and
Sure.
go ahead and address some issues with yourself and the board here. I would remind the board and everyone here tonight that we are a quasi judicial board. We don't set or can't change the township zoning laws. We're only here to interpret them and in the case of an area variance, try to make a decision for best interest of the applicant and the township. So in doing that, we do have a very clear set of directives from a zoning case, which was Duncan versus the Village of Middlefield. And through that court decision in 1986, it suggests 7 criteria for zoning appeals boards to consider in deciding whether the owner has encountered practical difficulties. Those criteria, which are not exclusive, there are 7 items that are listed, and you've answered those to your thoughts on it. What we have to consider tonight is the zoning code and apply what the zoning code requires and whether we can issue a variance in this hearing. So I would start with the first one. Let me turn here. First one is whether the property will yield a reasonable return or whether there can be a beneficial use of the property without the variance. And in exhibit number 2, exhibit number 1, the third page. It's up to you if you want to read your responses that you have written
Sure,
there or
sure.
expand on that.
Factor number 1 in response to whether or not the property will yield a reasonable return or whether there will be a beneficial use of the property. The existing drive-through carryout needs to expand its space in order to achieve a reasonable return for this location.
Number 2 is whether the variance is substantial.
The existing building was built in 1986, predating the Berlin Township zoning ordinance. The requested variance is minor in nature and is largely a result of the nature of a drive-through carryout requiring vehicular access to 3 sides and how the existing structure was originally located on the site. The existing building structure was built closer than the minimum required side yard.
And we will come back and discuss this one as a board, but I do have to mention you're looking at a 16-foot additional encroachment into the side yard setback. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The third is whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or adjoining property suffer substantial detriment.
The existing neighborhood is a mixture of fast food, dining, office, industrial, and all related businesses loosely gathered along State Route 37 between Interstate 71 and Africa Road. The essential character of the neighborhood would not be substantially altered, nor would the adjoining property suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance.
Number 4 is whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services.
The granting of this variance would not adversely affect the delivery of government services. Water and sewer service are currently available to the site. Police and fire protection are also easily provided to the site.
Whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction.
The applicant purchased this property in 2020 when the existing building was already non-compliant with the current zoning code.
But were they aware of the zoning restrictions?
I don't believe so, no. And at that time, I should say, I mean, they weren't considering an addition in 2020. This is a recent consideration of theirs. And so when they purchased the property, they weren't thinking of expanding.
And looking at exhibit 7, this property does have frontage of about 205 feet.
That's correct.
They do own the entire parcel there.
That's correct.
Number 6 is whether the problem can be solved by some other manner other than granting of a variance.
Given the existing condition of the site, constructing an addition in some other location would involve completely closing the operation of the current business. And so if they were to try to build an addition on the north, obviously that shuts off the entrance into the existing drive-through. In addition to that, if they were to try to build anything to the west or the east or the south, it would be a similar situation.
Have they looked at putting the driveway on the west side of the building and putting this addition on the east side?
That did not come up as a discussion, but I'm assuming if and I'm just talking off the cuff here, we would have to do that would be a major U-turn, trying to go into the front. They'd be blocking the exit traffic, like that entrance traffic, and that exit traffic would have to occur right there to the south of the existing exit. And then they'd have to, it may be possible.
Number 7, whether the variance preserves the spirit and intent of the zoning requirements and whether substantial justice will be done by granting the variance.
Given the open nature of many other parcels along and the width of the right-of-way of State Route 37, the spirit and intent of the side yard setback will be preserved and substantial justice will be done.
Thank you. If you would like to make any comments, or I would have you stand and be sworn in. You're our only person in the audience, so that's why I'm turning to you.
I'm still just trying to figure out what's going on, because there's nothing posted online so you can see, so I didn't even know coming into it, like which side of the building it was gonna be on, so. Yeah, so for now, I'm just listening, I guess.
So I will open up questioning from the board. Questions or discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question on the reasonable return. So it looks like about a third, we're adding about a third of the total space to this building.
That's fair.
So is the intent, like from a sales perspective, quote unquote, a reasonable return, are they looking to increase their inventory by a third more or half more, which then they're expecting like 20 or 30% more sales?
I mean, I haven't seen their pro forma,
Right.
so I don't know exactly what those percentages that they're pursuing. And I'm
To
not
me,
sure.
that's the key thing here, is that they're saying they need to build this to get a reasonable return out of their investment in that property. So, that to me is a critical point, outside of the setbacks, right? Because if they're, losing money right now as an example, right? And that this is kind of, hey, to keep my business viable, I need this additional inventory to drive my additional sales. You know what I mean?
I guess I'll answer your question by asking a question. Are you requesting financial statements to see that information, or?
I was just trying to understand a little bit more of a little bit more detail to what a reasonable return is.
Okay.
Because, I mean, the response is just saying, hey, we've got a reasonable return. Well, there's a little more detail would help me understand what that is.
And I think they bought a drive-through that's been in business for almost 40 years there. So what were their expectations when they bought it? Because now they're requesting a variance that is at 960 feet into a side yard setback.
I will say this is, of the times I've had these presentations before variances, that one is always the one that gets the most discussion because I'm not quite sure why they add that particular factor, but that one's, it's a tough one because typically the issue is related to space, right? And distances. It's, you know, if I'm asking to build my garage and it encroaches in the rear yard setback, it's like, that's not technically a financial issue. And so this one's, I think is a tough one. Now, I can certainly go back and ask for particular percentages and what we think the economic impact will be.
The other
On this
thing is
particular
they're adding office space as an example. And, you know, are they intending to increase their hours of operation as a result? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, some of that detail, I think, is a little bit important relative to that first factor. Because the variance is significant enough that, you know, establishing that first factor is, I think, important.
I can say that they're definitely not intending to increase their hours of operation. It'll still be what it is today. This is just to have, I mean, right now, you may or may not have been there. I mean, their office function within the space is nearly non-existent, right?
It's within the cooler area, right? Yeah, so-
Right, I mean, they're standing between, you know, crates of material. And so that was the reasoning behind adding that space up above.
Well, and could they also speak to, because the size of the coolers, one is going to double their space. The second one is going, by the amount of having the space of the two new coolers, it's going to quadruple their inventory. So are they having issues during peak seasons that the inventory is depleted? I mean, I understand that you have beer deliveries daily. Or if every other day, is that the reason why? Because they increase in the business? That they need to go this large and this size of coolers?
They definitely do want to use, I mean, if you could, and perhaps I should have taken some interior photos. So the existing 5-door cooler to the northeast there, that's all cooler, right? So there's that, and then within the existing office, a portion of that is a angular cooler that's inside that door. There's another door that comes out into the drive-through area. And so they are indeed seeking to increase that inventory so that they're not crawling all over each other and the business can be more efficient in that.
I mean, but really, I mean, most existing drive-throughs, every inch of their space, except for the lane for the car to go through, is usable storage space. And by adding the two coolers, it is, you know, wouldn't you say it's tripling the size of storage?
It's adding about a third of the size, the overall structure, plus it's going taller, so there's additional square footage going up.
Yeah, I mean, just like looking at because no matter what, if they don't go taller, they're still going to go into.
They're going 16 more feet
Into the existing.
And
Is there different size coolers where they wouldn't have to go as wide?
Yeah, there's a myriad of different sizes of coolers. That is correct, yes.
Okay.
So so this is a 16-foot dimension from the face of the building. Is the board saying they'd be more comfortable if it were 8 as opposed to 16? I'm trying to get a sense of is it because it's so much of the existing side yard setback?
it's not just that it's 8 feet, it's 8 feet by 60 feet long.
Mhm.
And, you know, we have to look at it as, the question is whether the variance is substantial? And we're talking about a building that, whether it's built correctly or whether it's 2 feet into the variance already, But to go further, we can't say, well, I built it wrong the first time, so now we should be able to go even further. I think it was part of your discussion. But now we're looking at going 16 more feet into a 28-foot requirement. So what's that? Leave us 12 feet there of between the edge of the building to the property line. And the zoning code is in place for a reason, that there's side yard setbacks between the adjoining properties. So, I think as a board, we would have to answer number 2, that this is a substantial variance for us to consider.
Do you know, and you may not know, the rationale behind the height plus the depth of the building with regard to determining the side yard setback? Because this is, I'm trying to think, I think this is the only zoning code that I know of that makes it, it's not a fixed number, so to
Right.
speak. It's kind of a flexible
Yep.
dimension as opposed to being a fixed
Right.
side yard setback. Not sure if you know the history behind.
I don't know how that was determined, other than this is a commercial area. You're correct, and all of our residential areas have a fixed setback. But those are usually between 25 to 40 feet. So, even if it was a fixed number, we would be encroaching. There's nowhere else in our zoning code that would allow for, call it 10 to 12 foot
Right.
side yard setback.
So let me ask this. So as is, most clients want to, they want to maximize the use of their parcels. If I were to go back to them and say, the board is uncomfortable with the extent of how large this encroachment is, if we were to make it something less than, so that it's not as egregious with the board, I mean, obviously, we'd have to come back and have that discussion again. But is that something that the board would feel more comfortable with? If in fact, yes, there are coolers that are 8 feet deep as opposed to 16 feet, which would mean, it's not as much. I mean, we probably wouldn't do the addition of above at that point, right? It's only 8 feet. Just so when I go back to have this conversation with them, would the board be more comfortable if it's a smaller number,
And
by half or by a third or whatever?
we could only give you an official response on the
On what's here,
information that's
yes.
been presented tonight.
Yeah.
At 8 feet, I would say 8 feet is still 8 feet further into a side yard setback. You're now somewhere between 19 to 20 feet.
Right.
When you're required at 28, so it's still, that word substantial is not great at defining exactly what that number should be, but that's what we would have to take into consideration.
Right.
And
It's hard to quantify that.
But it's not just that it's, an 8 feet by 8 foot coolers would be, much smaller, but you're talking about an 8 foot cooler going 60 feet down the side of the building.
Right.
You're still taking up a lot of additional square footage there.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why has it even been, what's the reason for not going on the east side of the building? Moving your drive out? I mean, there's obviously plenty of land there, but what's in the way of moving that drive out 20 feet and building your cooler on that side of the building?
Well, then we get into the other township then, right?
Well,
Because we're.
I didn't care about it. I'm just asking why you aren't doing it on that side of the building. I don't care if it's Berlin Township or Berkshire Township. Why aren't you trying to build it on that side of the building? Where you have more room, where you don't have to worry about going into the setback. That's my question. Why aren't they wanting to do it on the other side?
Because if we put it there, we are, I don't have that number there, we're about,
Like 205 feet?
well, that's all the way to that parcel line.
Okay.
I don't have the
I'm not
township,
familiar with the piece of property, that's why I'm asking, what's in the way there? What's stopping you from going on that side? What's stopping the owners from going on that side with their building?
well, we'd have the issue on the other side.
Still have the setback issue on, for the drive,
Right.
the drive coming through, because they'd have to build a driveway on the other side.
But I think what Brad's saying is
Move their driveway this way and build their boat house.
there's no permanent structure.
Yeah, but the line, there's a parcel line that's not shown, right? That's right, I'll call it at the edge of the existing drive. That is the line between Berlin and Berkshire. And so then we'd have to be 28 feet from that. So we'd have the same issue on the other side.
But that line's not shown on this is all one parcel or two parcels?
Exhibit 3 that shows the township line, but it's all one parcel, so.
Exhibit 10, that show both parcels. Not as a problem, but it does show both.
Yeah, I don't know if I copied, information from the county. It is actually two separate parcels. And I guess that is from the county. Is that from yeah, that's from the auditor's
I
office.
was going off of your drawing here, it just showed the dimensions of what, it showed the property line.
The parcel next door is the one that has all of the sheds, right?
That's correct. That is correct.
Have you seen that to someone?
Yes.
That's why I was asking, because on this drawing, it shows it goes 260 feet, I mean, that's almost 150 feet past the edge of the building from that, so. That's my
So this is
question
the
is.
parcel that we're talking about?
Another.
So exhibit 7 does not show us that it's two parcels there.
That's what I was looking
And,
at.
well, and that's based on, the exhibit 7 is based on the survey that Landmark did in September of 22.
Say that again, please.
Exhibit 7 is based on the survey that Landmark Survey did on September 27, 22, Exhibit 3.
But I think for us to make any decision, we need to know whether this property has 205 feet of frontage. Because if you're saying that it's actually two parcels as shown in Exhibit 10, well, then your road frontage is much smaller and makes this situation even more challenging to discuss. Because your road, what you're saying would be the second parcel has the majority of the 200 feet of the road.
That's correct. That's correct.
So the exhibit 10, the parcel in question, the 418.10.001.050.000 is indicated on that one as this.
Right.
So I'm assuming this is some number, different than this block parcel number. So was a separate notification sent to that parcel owner? As part of the exhibits?
Yeah, Allen Creek Investments owns that.
But for this side yard setback, you're now, what you provided to us in Exhibit 7, you're showing as 205 feet of both parcels.
Right, and that's based on the survey. But his question was about whether or not we put it on the right side. We're not trying to put it on.
Okay, the reason I asked why you didn't put it on the right, because this shows you have 205 feet of land there, that's why I asked.
Right.
Instead of 24 feet of land, so now they're saying if they don't own that parcel there, right?
No, they own it.
So what are they doing with it? I guess is my next question.
They're leasing it. Someone just asked a question about leasing it to little storage buildings.
Okay. When's their leases up? And they move their driveway then? So they have room to work without us doing this.
I'd have to talk. I don't know who would,
That's okay. You answered the question.
I don't know what the implications are building across a township line. I don't know what the implications are.
Other questions from the board?
I have a question. Speaking to the north side of the property,
Yes.
has there been consideration of extending would be the west side of the building for the coolers and maybe a office space located at the back of the property as opposed to going into the setback? And it would still facilitate the lane and turn in? Because it seems like there's plenty of room to go back.
Yeah, if we, and I understand the zoning code is not concerned about whether a business is operational, but if we were to build to the north, then, we can't operate while we're having that construction. Because we did consider that, right? It's like, if we were to build to the north, then, that whole 24 feet by 60 feet, if I can use that number, would have to be, that's a construction site at that point. And so I could no longer use the rest of the current building as a drive-through. They'd have to somehow, they'd have to walk up or something and have delivery or whatever. So that was considered.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, just as a review for the board. Question number one, whether the property will yield reasonable return or whether there can be a beneficial use of the property without the variance. The owner's not here tonight to answer that question. But that business has been situated there for nearly 40 years, so it could probably continue in its current facility. So we have to consider that we're not putting this business out of business if we don't offer a variance here tonight. Whether the variance is substantial, the applicant is asking to go 16 feet into the side yard setback, which right now they're either at or 2 feet into the setback. So they're going another 16 feet, which I personally would say they're asking for a substantial variance here. Number three, I'm not sure that it changes the adjoining properties there, other than it is going to be extremely close to a property line there. We don't have the owner of the property to the west here tonight to voice any concerns. Number four, I don't believe is a concern. Number five, whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of zoning restrictions. I struggle with that one.
Yeah, that one's always, it's like,
When you enter our township, in most areas it says zoning enforced. If you're buying a building to go into business in the township, I think you would at least look at the zoning code to make sure you're compliant. You know, so if they didn't look at the zoning restrictions 3 years ago, the zoning code's been in place for many years. That was available to them, it's online, they could have, I think they could have looked at that. Whether the problem can be solved by some other manner, other than granting a variance, you know, there has been some discussion here. You know, building on the east side might be an option. There's definitely some confusion, I think, from the board here about where this lot actually exists. We're given an exhibit that does not show a split lot. Then Exhibit 10 does show it as a split lot. So that's either favorable or unfavorable. If it's actually 2 lots, your variance now would be, you know, giving any type of a variance would be substantial. You have a building that you're saying basically just barely fits on this property. If that lot is actually split in 2. You know, number 7, whether the variance preserves the spirit and intent of zoning requirement, whether substantial justice would be done by granting the variance. You know, we at the board have to look at this both on the applicant's behalf, but also on the township's behalf, and follow whether we're trying to maintain the intent of the zoning code in our township. And I think our side yard, rear yard setbacks are very important in the township to consider. This is a heavily traveled road entering into our township. So, you know, it is going to be seen. And, you know, when this was established and this formula for setting side yard setbacks in the township, you know, that's in place. It's not our decision here whether to change it or not.
Understood.
So, based on all of that, I will give you an opportunity to respond, and then I'm going to ask for a motion on this application.
We're at the mercy of the board. There's always options to do a myriad of things. This particular option is the one that the owners wanted to pursue. You know, perhaps we need to modify some things. I don't know if there's anything that the board can offer. Sometimes board members have suggestions of how something that might occur that they could be in favor of. But
We have
yeah,
to rule on what's in front of us. So, you know, I view not having the owners here as a challenge because they can speak to their business and they're not here to speak to their business. And the reason behind their desire to have this, you know, and why they're making this choice and so forth. Because at the end of the day, you know, as Don said, the variance is substantial. So, you know, justifying the you know, the first few factors is in my mind critical relative to why they want the substantial variance.
right.
You know?
I mean, I will say this about the 7 factors. In my opinion, many of them are subjective, right? Whether something is substantial, whether a return is reasonable. And so in every case, we're reliant on the boards to offer a subjective interpretation of these factors. And even if the owners were here, you may or may not agree with their assessment of what a reasonable return is. So, and that's why I say we're at the mercy of the board.
And we can only make our decision based on what's been provided to us. You know, and I think are some questions that were left unanswered. Some of the exhibits are a little confusing. So, you know, that brings a challenge to the board in making a decision as well. So
I mean,
Options.
how often, well, I can chat with that later in terms of the amount of,
So we can either take a motion from the board, and we can vote on this, or Or we can table this if you would like.
Well, here's what I am going to do based on the discussion that we've had here tonight. I'm going to go back and, like I said, there's 20 different versions of this we could do. And whether you guys vote or not, I'm going to go back to them and say, you know, what I'm hearing is there's some major pushback from almost every board member having concern with one or more of the 7 factors. And so I will go back to my client and say, you know, maybe we should consider something a little less. I mean, because there's probably a way we can do it without even coming back to you, right? Depending on what we did. And so.
If you're coming back with a new case, then that would be.
Right, if we come back, it will be substantially different. So I think at that point, it would be considered almost a different application. Is that fair? Because the design would be majorly different. So it wouldn't be an alteration of this current one. So even if we come back, it'll be a different design.
So as far as options go, as Don was saying, it's either we can rule on this as presented, either yes or no would be the answer, right?
Yeah.
And then, or if we table it, that allows them an opportunity to come back to speak to these factors, and then
If they bring back a different design,
it would be a new application.
Right, the design, different design, because I don't believe, from what I'm hearing from the board, regardless of the answers to some things that were asked today, I don't know that solves the issue. If they said, you know, we want to make X amount of return because they're 16-foot coolers, I don't know that they can make the case to make you feel comfortable with the substantialness of the encroachment. So I'm okay with you voting. I don't know that I don't think tabling is almost like voting in my mind. Because if you table it, what I bring back will need to be substantially different from what we're looking at.
so I will ask the board, either I can make a motion or I'll take a motion from the board members.
I'll give a motion to not approve as submitted.
Okay, so do I have a second?
I'll second.
So is it to deny? Is it deny? Okay, Mr. Acevedo?
Yes.
Mr. Maka?
Yes.
Let's see. Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Sutton?
Yes. Case has been denied. I do thank you for coming in tonight. Please let your clients know the reasons, and if they want to follow back up with Jake.
Will the minutes are published, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, some jurisdictions do it different. The discussion that was had today will be in that voting. And so we can certainly share that when we discuss it, and that way he'll have it in front of him, and then we can go from there.
You can also access it on Facebook and YouTube. These are live streamed as well, so you can retrieve those after
Oh,
the
okay,
meeting's finished,
okay.
so you can watch that.
Okay, very good. And I'm assuming the notes will be posted online as well?
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
approve them at what, the December
Probably
18th meeting?
30 days hence. Okay.
Yeah, but you could get an early copy. You can get my information, and if I could give a draft, they're public record draft, so,
Okay.
yeah, whichever.
Very good. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. We do have one other item to cover, and that's our organization for 2024. We need to elect a chair and a vice chair. Take motions from the board. Ms. Sherman?
Motion for Don Sutton as chairman.
Second. Okay, Mr. Acevedo, any other nominations? Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mrs. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Maka,
Yes.
Mrs., or Mr. Cook,
Yes.
and Mr. Sutton?
Yes. Thank you very much. And we also have to elect vice chair, so do I have a motion?
I'd like to nominate Jason Montevideo for chair, or vice chair, I'm sorry.
Call the roll, please.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
I second.
You did?
Oh, sorry.
Mr., I'm sorry, who made the motion? I'm sorry, okay, Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo?
Yes.
Mr. Maka?
Yes.
And Mr. Sutton?
Yes. And with that, I will call the meeting to a close. Thank you.